from the Red Sparrows team, the lowest family aeroplane which is based here, and one from the Jimmy Sierra Yankee Romeo Roger. Again, building flying ready, and solo and then solo flying out. The battle of Britain there then takes us past the hour of 8 o'clock with the IWM Duxford from 1A Spitfire 3200. That was past second this morning in concert with the representative of the Network of the FY9. With the
evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's shut the music off. Hello, how are you doing? Good evening. Not often we can say good evening, is it? Not that one. Something like that. Right, gradually edging ourselves towards an air display this evening, and it's looking like an absolute beauty. Sun's moving round, which is lovely for a Duxford show. We're used to seeing backlit scenes that you're enjoying of me at the moment. I'm a bit of a haze in the sunshine here, so forgive me that. But hopefully, it's not me you want to see anyway, is it? It's aeroplanes, isn't it? And we're going to have plenty of those to come up shortly. I think Adam's got a shot at the moment of... That's me. There's Adam. We've got the Bearcat and the Corsair started up, and they'll be taking off shortly to kick off our flying display in about 20 minutes. Actually, I'll give you a bit of audio of those as well. I'm juggling too much, checking audio levels, etc. Hey, thanks very much for joining us. If you haven't watched a Planes TV broadcast before, hello, my name's Ian. I run Planes TV. We film air shows around largely the UK, really, but we've done plenty overseas as well. A busy year this year, which has been wonderful after a few years quiet. This is our first, or my first, I should say, trip to an evening flying display here at... I'll take these off as well in case you're getting echo. Evening flying display. So it happened last year for the first time, I believe. Next year will be 50 years of air shows at IWM Duxford, and I'm sure in one of those years we'll have had an evening display at some point, but maybe not. I don't know. Where's Ben when you need him? I'm sure he's... it'd be nice to think he's halfway through a book, wouldn't it? We'll see. So yeah, our first visit to an evening flying display, and why is that significant? Well, for people like me who nerd out on the sort of flying condition, the lighting conditions, I should say. So the sun's a little bit lower in the sky, it creates a little bit more warmth, and I'm looking at the aircraft that we can see sat out there now. You can see them really glowing in the early evening sunshine. We'll be live streaming right the way through till 8:30, and for the last flying display item, and that's Mark Jeffries, and he'll have some pyrotechnics accompanying his display, so onboard pyros with the extra 300, which will close out the display. So what have we got coming up today? Let me just find myself again. I'm sure you'd rather stare at the Bearcat and Corsair, and I'll bring them to you as soon as they start moving around, and they will be our first item. So getting airborne to get ready for their slot time of 6 o'clock. That's Navy 1 and 2, Bearcat and Corsair. Then the next item is the Nimrod, so the Hawker biplane, solo performance from Nimrod with Pete Kinsey flying. Then the Radial combo. This is, if you watched our old Buckingham broadcast, you'll have seen the three Yaks, Yak 18. I'll get you a shot of those. You know what I'm on about. So, if you're watching a live stream of air shows, you probably know what I'm on about here, but Yak 18 and the two Yak 52s, they'll be flying together, but also in this slot with the Beaver and the T6. Both of those, that's pan over, a little janky pan over, but you get what I'm on about. The Beaver is pulling through the prop there, and the Texan on the right as well. They'll all be joined up together, I believe, for a 5-ship. Nice, radial combo, so that's at 6:25. What else do we have? So Spitfire Hurricane after that's Denny and Brown. That'll be nice. Sally B was due to fly with, it says Thunderbolt here, but it's not now. I think it's Spitfire. Is it a fighter collection? Not sure. So Sally B with a Spitfire. We don't mind which one, do we? And then Curtis 1 and 2. Again, I'm reading off here P40C and P36, but I've seen a little bit of moving around gone on there, so we'll see what we get. I'm really looking forward to this. So this is a little bit later on, into 7:30, and the way things are looking, the sun's going to be, that bit lower, and everything a little, warming up and providing some really nice light for the Vampire and Sea Fury. That's at 7:30. A couple of formation passes and then solos from Paul Bonham and Kenneth Arkwiesler. That's going to be something. Vampire, Sea Fury, lovely, both very capable display pilots as well. See these airplanes heading out. So that's Sea Fury Vampire, and then we have the Havilland formation, Fox Moth, Tiger Moth, Chipmunk, Chipmunk. Then it's a Spitfire 1 with the Buchon, and as I say, the extra closing out the display. And I misspoke earlier, so just the one slot for the Yaks, Yak 18 with the Yak 52s, flying with the Beaver and T6, but then I anticipate a bit of a 3-ship routine from the Yaks.
Magnificent naval fighters from the Fighter Collections fleet based here at Duxford, taxiing past the control tower. They'll be getting airborne shortly, going off to hold prior to running in at 6 o'clock prompt for the start of our programme this evening.
Gorgeous. You'll have hopefully heard there Ben Donnell is here as well. Yeah, fear not, if you're new around here, I'm not going to drive you mad with me attempting to film aeroplanes and commentate throughout the whole thing. We've got Ben Donnell, very professional airshow commentator. Sadly not the full PA setup that you'd normally have at a big Duxford show that we'll have at September. So you might be able to hear in the background. I haven't got the microphone up at the moment, but my mic pointed at a tannoy speaker is your PA feed today, so it's not the ideal. So bear with us on that one. There's little more we can do. Poor old Ben's using a sort of tannoy microphone, and it's about as good as we're going to get. But the content of what he says will be excellent as ever. And I've got Adam on a second camera angle, as you will have figured out by now, probably. I'll just give him a locked off shot so he can cut away. Yeah, so looking forward to you're about to hand me something interesting. Oh, Little Granston. You drag me on along tomorrow, are you? You're live at the moment. Do a plug for.
Tomorrow we've got the Little Granston Air and Car Show.
There you go.
22. The little book of Big Granston, which you're going to read through.
Okay, starting page 1. Here we go.
Have a read of it.
I will. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you. I'll be on the beach tomorrow, sadly. Don't tell anyone, but sadly I'm trying to squeeze a last day out of the summer holidays tomorrow, so it won't be at Little Granston, sadly. Perhaps some of you are going, and definitely a worthwhile visit. I haven't been ever, I don't think. I'll manage it one year. Right, I'll probably hand over to Ben since he's chatting away and say enjoy the show. If you are enjoying what you're seeing, do make sure to subscribe on YouTube, of course, and like this video so other people find it. Feel free to share it to like-minded aviation enthusiast friends. Speaking of which, you can make some of those in the chat that I'll be monitoring through the day. If you've got any questions, do throw them my way in the chat. I'll do my best to keep an eye out and answer them, but I am live mixing the show and I'm on the telephoto camera today, so juggling a fair amount, but I do really like to see what's going on in the chat, so I'll do my best to keep abreast of that. But yeah, let me hand over to Ben and let him guide you through the day. As I say, first slot time is... well, it's about 13 minutes time. So I anticipate, actually, it'll be a few minutes before they get airborne. Maybe I'll do a bit of nattering. Let's see who's in the chat. Ryan, good to see you. Saying good evening in. We're still vaguely on camera. Yes, I am. As I say, not that you want to see me particularly. Jerry Evans saying Navy power, and that really is off how you could best describe our first item. So Corsair and Bearcat, big, powerful radial engine aircraft. Carrier-borne aircraft of the Second World War. They're going to look pretty glorious in this afternoon light and the sun. Yeah, this is the way to do it at Duxford. As I say, I nerd out on give you a shot of something glowing in the early evening sunshine. The Yak getting ready there. Zalek's getting his Yak prepped. Yeah, if you're a photographer, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So sun in the right place, nice glowing aeroplanes. That's the way we like to see it. And we've got the weather today, ladies and gents, so really good to see that. I've just stared at the sun, so now I can't read the chat. Hello from Purvis, Mississippi, USA. Hello, highballing hogger. No, thank you for joining us. Nice to see Nice to see people joining us from overseas. People slagging off camera work of other events that I won't read out, but hopefully you won't be doing the same about mine in a little while. You might be grumbling about the audio. I'll do my best on that front. And PC Freak saying good evening from Belgium. Hello. Are you heading to San Nicole, PC Freak? Excellent show coming up over there that sadly I won't be going to. We do, I should say, before we get going, so we have got lots of events coming up. We're doing live broadcast at Jersey. What's that, week and a half? The following weekend we're here to Duxford, and that will go out on our streaming service at watch.planestv.com. That's a paid service, but yeah, really big air show at Duxford, looking at 20 or 19 Spitfires, 20 Spitfires, don't quote me. It depends on the day really, doesn't it? With that many aeroplanes you could get a snag with one or two, we'll see. Lots of Hurricanes as well. Very much looking forward to the September show here. Then the following week we're actually out to the Czech Republic to produce the NATO Days English language live broadcast. So yeah, stay tuned. If you want to stay tuned, sign up to the email newsletter. Occasionally I find time to send that. I managed that about 45 minutes ago, so forgive me if you've only just spotted that and found the stream. All a little bit tight around holiday and children and things at this time of year. Any birds about to sing? Oh my gosh, Michael, you're referring to... Let's see some aeroplanes first, shall we? You're referring to the Tweety bird at Riat, I know. What a lovely sight that is in the early evening sun. I'll stop going on about it at some point, or I won't. I'll be constantly chatting to Adam through the day about it, but you'll stop hearing me going on about it very shortly as I hand over to Ben to take you through the flying. As I say, starting for real in about 9 minutes' time, we can expect to see those two hooning through in the early evening sunshine. Can't wait. What was I on about? I was talking to people in the chat. Oh yes, someone's saying, are there any birds about to tweet? Well, I hope not. And if there are, I don't have the same problem as we faced at Riat, which was a bird sat by our microphones for the best part of 2 hours. And our microphones at Air Tattoo, we sight them into the airfield, so it's airside. So there's no access to them except for essential personnel, and I don't quite slip into that category in that environment. So couldn't do much other than stare at the long grass and wonder where he was and what I could throw at this bird that sat right by a microphone was dominating the audio of the entire broadcast, and that was a bit of a challenge. Thanks for reminding me of that. Still not quite recovered. Gonna be great, guys, says Joey. And what's Joey said that everyone's envious of? Can't wait for the Battle of Britain show. I'll be there. Yeah, me too, and really looking forward to it. It's going to be a busy week, that, with Jersey on the Thursday. We'll ferry on the Friday morning, and we'll have pre-positioned a trailer here that will provide us the kit that we need to bring you a really action-packed September Battle of Britain air show. If you're not familiar with that show, it's sky full of Spitfires. So if you did watch the old Buckingham show, you'll remember the American Spit, which is actually over my shoulder there, flown by George, surname I forget, flown very nicely. And that aircraft will be providing the Joker to the finale of the event, which will be big formation of Spitfires, tail to ace, I assume. That's generally what occurs. You know, beautiful sights, beautiful sounds, and it's watch the live broadcast. But if you can get here, it's absolutely worthwhile. It's one of those really special airshow moments, at least here in the UK. I think Ben's got some information about the aeroplanes coming up, so I'll maybe hop in during the show. I may not, because I get quite busy with the camera, but I'll hand over to my microphone pointed at a tannoy speaker, so forgive me for the quality of it, but Ben will give you much more information and the enjoyable stuff you like to hear during an air show. I'll chat to you in a bit. Let's get you a picture of an aeroplane. The Yak starting up.
Double Wasp of 2,000 horsepower was the most powerful and largest capacity engine of any fighter at that time. It came into actually with the US Marine Corps in July of 1942, and it went on to become one of the most important fighter aircraft and indeed fighter bombers of the Pacific Theatre and indeed other theatres of the Second World War and beyond, because Corsairs continued serving into the Korean War of 1950 to 53 and other conflicts with different air arms. It was with the US Marine Corps that the Corsair excelled during the Marines' island hopping campaign through the Pacific leading up to VJ Day in August 1945. Once tactics for the air-to-air employment of the Corsair had been further refined, it proved able to outclass its main adversary, the Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0. In the air-to-ground role, meanwhile, Corsairs supported many of the most important amphibious landings of the latter stages of wartime, including the crucial battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. It wasn't just with the US Navy and Marine Corps that the aeroplane won its spurs. The Royal New Zealand Air Force used Corsairs very effectively in both the air-to-air and air-to-ground roles, and as we see represented by the fighter collections example here, our own Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy did too. Corsairs came into use with the Fleet Air Arm in June 1943, and at their peak they equipped 18 naval air squadrons in both the European and the Pacific theatres. What can you say about the aircraft accompanying it here, the Bearcat? It was just too late to see frontline service in World War II. It was developed by Grumman as the successor to their very successful F6F Hellcat, another great fighter of the Pacific War period. But Grumman gave it markedly improved performance and lighter weight, a classic combination of a small airframe with a big engine. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp again, this time of 2,100 horsepower. And it's able to power this aeroplane to a maximum speed just in excess of 420 miles an hour. While the Bearcat may not have been used operationally during the Second World War, it did equip 24 frontline squadrons of the US Navy. It became one of the first mounts of the US Navy Flight Demonstration Squadron, the Blue Angels. And while the Bearcat was soon superseded by the early jets, aircraft like the F-2H Banshee and the F-9F Panther, they were still used by second line and training squadrons. Bearcats also saw service with the French Air Force during the war in Indochina, most notably in the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, taking on insurgents of the Viet Minh. Both of these aircraft among the most popular elements of the magnificent fleet of the fighter collection based here at Duxford. running in now from the west, so look out to the right. The Goodyear MG1B Corsair and the Grumman F8F2P Bearcat. Break the Corsair off from its display because we've got an air ambulance helicopter that's about to transit through the overhead, which obviously takes priority. So the Corsair has just been sent round to the north to go and hold while that happens, and we'll be resuming the display very shortly. Wondering about the inverted gull wing configuration on the Corsair, well, the reason for that was because obviously being a carrier-borne fighter, the aircraft was designed to have folding wings so as to be able to stow as many of them as possible aboard the confined spaces of an aircraft carrier deck or in the hangar down below. Obviously there was at the same time a need to ensure that the huge propeller on the Corsair was given sufficient ground clearance, and so it was that the transport design team came up with the concept of the inverted gull wing, which gave rise to the Corsair forever being nicknamed the bent wing bird. this short intermission. The heli-med flight being allowed to pass uninterrupted through the airspace, and the Corsair resuming straight away. Final pass then from the Corsair. And now as that very dramatic black cloud also passes across the airfield, in comes the Bearcat. then in for its final pass. Saw something in that display of the penetrating vertical performance of this fighter, one of the things it's most known for, and this while it's being flown at a pretty conservative cruise power setting. And as the Bearcat positions for landing, our menagerie of radial-engined aeroplanes lining up at the western end, ready to get airborne and form up. And this is definitely not a combination we've seen at Duxford before. It should make a pretty throaty sound as they come past in formation. We'll be seeing two separate elements, one of two aircraft, the other of three. And they're the next but one act on the programme. To roll. Some very different aircraft performances to match up in this combination. Off first, rolling from the hard, is the Yak 18T, and that's followed off the grass by the de Havilland Canada Beaver. Then we've got the North American Harvard and a pair of Yak 52s. There's the Bearcat into land, completing that opening sequence of naval fighters from the fighter collection. We had Stu Goldspink in the Corsair, and it was Brian Smith at the controls of the Bearcat. Well, we stick with the naval theme for the next item, another aircraft from the fighter collection, but one from a previous era. In the early 1930s, the Fleet Air Arm of the Royal Navy needed a faster and more capable carrier-borne fighter to replace the outmoded Fairey Flycatcher. Hawker it was they turned to. They came up first with a private venture called the Norn, and then the aircraft we're about to see, which has its origins in the land-based Hawker Fury, but is in reality a far different machine, with greater span wings, flotation boxes in the wings and fuselage, and various other refinements. The result, running in from our right, the beautiful sound of the 600 horsepower Rolls-Royce Kestrel engine powering the Hawker Nimrod 1. 2 examples of the Hawk and Nimrod were produced. 2 of them survive. Both of them are based here. There's a Mark II with the Historic Aircraft Collection, and this, one of the 42 Nimrod 1s, which first came into service with 402 Fleet Fighter Flight on HMS Courageous in November 1942. In fact, only 3 Fleet Air Arm squadrons would be equipped with the Nimrod, which were formed out of those flights. 800 on Courageous, 801 on Furious, and 802 on Glorious. They were deployed quite widely aboard the Navy's carriers in the 1930s, including to the Eastern Mediterranean after Italy under Mussolini invaded Abyssinia. Perhaps thankfully, given the fact that the aircraft was by then somewhat outmoded. They were to see no action against the enemy. 18 Nimrods were still on strength with the Fleet Air Arm in various second line and support roles by the time war broke out in 1939. This aircraft was the 3rd production Nimrod 1, built at the Hawker plant at Kingston upon Thames in Surrey. It was delivered to 408 Fleet Fighter Flight, which became 802 Squadron, and it served aboard HMS Glorious before being struck off the inventory in 1938. The remains ended up in a scrapyard and were donated to the RAF Museum. They were later bought by Aero Vintage, and from 1994 were the subject of a full restoration, which was concluded with the maiden flight in 2000. It carries its original 802 Squadron markings. It was the subject of an exchange with the Fighter Collection for a Hurricane in 2002, and it's part of TFC's fleet to this day. And Pete Kinsey, their chief pilot, had the pleasure of flying the Nimrod 1 for us today. Well now, look out to the motorway end this time, to your left. Oh, I thought they were going to be running in on that orbit, but not quite. Well, you can see them anyway, the aircraft in our next combination. They're not all going to be in a close formation, but we'll see them juxtaposed in the same piece of sky. That unusual selection of radial engined aeroplanes that we saw taking off a little earlier. Looks like they're going to let the Spitfire 5 from the Historic Aircraft Collection and the Hurricane Heritage Hurricane 1 roll first from the grass. And indeed, here they go.
Hey folks, if you're just joining, thanks so much. My name's Ian. Ben's commentating through the day, but I thought I'd just give a welcome and a big thanks to Chris for the little £2, I shouldn't say little, should I? I should say very gratefully, the £2 super chat, which you can leave if you're enjoying the stream. You can give a donation here on YouTube. You can join as a member as well. So I should point my camera at myself so you know who on earth is speaking. It's probably going to be a bit underexposed. Not too bad. Let's try that. A little bit grim, not too bad. Got the aircraft running in now, but thanks for joining everybody. Do subscribe if you're enjoying what you're seeing. See some aeroplanes.
As I said, the link here, the different types of Radial engine, and it's a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R985 that we're going to hear first, powering the de Havilland Canada DHC2 Beaver from the Aircraft Restoration Company. It was pretty soon after World War II that the Canadian arm of de Havilland hit upon the idea of producing a very versatile utility aeroplane for the post-war era, one that could operate crucially as a land plane, as a float plane, or on skis with minimal modification. This was the result. With its big high-lift wing and the powerful Pratt & Whitney engine, it gave this aeroplane superb short takeoff and landing characteristics. The Beaver's first major sales success actually took place with the US Army, and it entered service in 1951. They operated very successfully as light transports, liaison aircraft and air ambulances during the Korean War, and they served for many years in all major theatres where the US Army was active. We know it best as, for many years, the principal medium-range communications and photographic reconnaissance platform for the British Army Air Corps. Again, the Beaver was used by the Army Air Corps all around the world, most notably perhaps in Borneo, in the Aden Protectorate, and particularly in Northern Ireland. In fact, it was the main surveillance platform the Army had at its disposal for many years in Northern Ireland and helped avert many terrorist initiatives. This is an ex-Army Air Corps Beaver, albeit civilianised in its restoration for the Aircraft Restoration Company. And it flew again in ARC's hands after a lengthy restoration in February 2011. They use it as an aircraft for support purposes for their warbirds, amongst other duties, as well occasionally as a display act in its own right. But here, in from the motorway end, come the flying comrades, the Yak-18T and the two Yak-52s. we hear there is the 9-cylinder Vedenev M14P radial engine of 360 horsepower that the Soviets used in all sorts of different aeroplanes. And we see here contrasting Yak designs. The aircraft in the lead is a very interesting one, the Yak 18T. 4 or 5 seater that was conceived as a pilot trainer for the Soviet state airline Aeroflot. Went into production in 1972. It was used by 5 Aeroflot pilot training schools in the initial training phase that cadets would go through, but it also found sales with other Soviet operators such as aero clubs. And of course it's very much in the Soviet design mould. Simple, rugged airframe, fabric-covered tailplane, elevators and rudder. Most of the structure is made from riveted alloy panels. The wing centre section is conventional all-metal. What's perhaps most interesting about it, you wouldn't think it from looking at it, but the aircraft leading this formation is fully aerobatic. We won't actually see that in this display, but we will see that it's a very manoeuvrable platform. In towards us for a break. This is a new team for this season, combining these different Yak designs. We've now got the 2 Yak 52s coming in for an opposition run. And both of these designs, the Yak 18T and the Yak 52, became enormously popular in the West following the fall of the Iron Curtain in the early 1990s. Indeed, production of the Yak 18T was resumed at the plant in Smolensk to meet that sort of demand in 1993. The production license then passed to the Techno-Avia firm from the Yakovlev Design Bureau, and they went on to build many more. As for the Yak 52, well, it became a huge success story during the 1990s on the Western market. It had been developed as a 2-seat nose wheel equipped development of the tail dragger single-seat Yak 50 aerobatic aircraft. Its main user was intended to be DOSAF, the Soviet Union's paramilitary flying training organization. But again, it ended up appealing to a rather wider market. And as with the 18T, ruggedness and simplicity are absolutely to the fore with this airframe. You might have noticed the main wheels don't actually retract fully into the wings, which is a good thing if a student pilot were to forget to lower the gear on landing. And in terms of its systems, it's pretty rugged as well. Pneumatics are used to operate the engine starter, the flaps, the brakes, and the undercarriage. And as the 52 clears, back in comes the 18T. It's estimated that about 1,000 of these have been built. Techno-Avia developed it into a 6-seat version, but it was never built in large quantity in that form. More recently, a German firm called Red Aircraft has converted one of these to be powered by its 500 horsepower V12 turbo diesel engine, which may well find favour with some customers. This one was built in 1993. 20 years later, it came onto the British Civil Aircraft Register, and since 2021, it's been owned by airline pilot Nigel Newton. And now we're going to see what I was talking about with regard to the aerobatic capabilities of the Yak 52. in for an opening loop. These aircraft very good mounts for the pilot wishing to get into aerobatic flying at the basic or intermediate levels. In fact, the World Air Sports governing body, the FAI, the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, has what you might call a one-make aerobatic category intended solely for Yak 52s. All the series production of the 52 was undertaken in Romania by the company that became known as Aerostar, and they helped fulfill the significant Western demand that grew up for these aeroplanes. It was with sales to the West in mind that Aerostar developed several versions of the 52. They have uprated engines, some of them. There's also a tailwheel variant. And now we see the solo aerobatic performer in this display rejoining his two comrades. The first full public display for this team took place a few weeks back at the old Buckingham Air Show in Norfolk. Very much honing their skills on the display circuit. And now you can see back into formation for another run down the display line.
Hi folks, another quick welcome to this live stream from Planes TV. Thank you very much for tuning in, and a big thank you to Tarnish7 saying appreciate you covering this and other shows. Keep up the good work. Certainly shall do, Tarnish. And Watalt92, thanks for bringing this to the public. Have a nice evening. We shall do with that £10. Thank you so much. I suppose I should clarify that I'm not hitting the town with your £10 we're told, but that will go as a contribution to keeping the channel going. Oh, it's euros, isn't it? I withdraw it. Thanks guys, thank you all so much for contributing. I can see a $10 there one as well. Oh, 82nd guy, thank you so much for your contribution as well, saying I enjoy every one of your shows. Thanks. Well, thank you 82nd guy, that's really generous of you. Really do appreciate support like that. Right, concentrate on filming these aeroplanes.
Calling for smoke on and about to perform their final break, the Yak 18T and the 252s of the Flying Comrades. We had Phil Hardesty leading them in the 18T, Alex Luton and Tom Turner in the 252s, but now the North American Harvard. And one of the most familiar radial engine notes you'll ever hear. One of the greatest pilot training aircraft of all time, built to the tune of nearly 15,500 examples, and powered by the 600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney Wasp engine. It's the effect of the propeller tips going supersonic that creates the buzzsaw type rasp that's always accompanying this aircraft through the air. An aircraft that made an enormous contribution on the Allied side during the Second World War. Such was the throughput of pilots through training schools equipped with this aircraft to the US Army Air Corps, as it was, Army Air Forces as it became. It was the T6 or the AT6 Advanced Trainer. To the British and Commonwealth Forces, it was the Harvard. To the US Navy, it was the SNJ. Crucially, it was an aeroplane that demanded a good deal of handling care and dexterity on the part of a student pilot. It wasn't something that you could just get in and fly easily, although it wasn't too difficult to pilot. No wonder it's still so much in demand to this day as a tail dragger trainer for people destined to fly the likes of Spitfires and Hurricanes on the display circuit. This one's a very interesting example. It's in US Navy colours, but it never actually served with the US Navy. Quite a lot of the Harvards you see around the airshow circuit were built in Canada, but not this one. It came from the North American Aviation production line in Dallas, Texas. It's an AT6C model, known as a Harvard 2A. It was first allocated to the RAF, but then went to the South African Air Force and the Portuguese Air Force. It's been operated in Britain now since 1979. And you can go flying, or indeed, if you're a private pilot, be instructed in this aeroplane. It forms part of the Anglian Warbirds fleet based at Earl's Cone in Essex. And I know it's also used quite a lot by Classic Wings here at Duxford for their Harvard pleasure flying operations too. In come the Yaks, Tom Turner in the red and silver one, Alex Luton in the largely white and yellow aeroplane, Phil Hardisty in the 18T. Incidentally, it was Martin Overall who flew the Beaver for us a little earlier. And turning finals behind them, Nigel Wilson in the Harvard. And he's about to leave the airspace clear for our next item. From the Historic Aircraft Collection, the Supermarine Spitfire 5B, and from Hurricane Heritage, their Battle of Britain veteran, Hawker Hurricane 1. And they're going to be running in shortly from the right. The Spitfire, in this formation, a Mark 5B that served during the Second World War with two of the famous Polish manned fighter squadrons that flew as part of the Royal Air Force numbers 315 and 317 squadrons. Today, it appears in the markings of 317. With it, Hurricane 1R 4118 that served with number 605 squadron during the Battle of Britain and downed 5 enemy aircraft, 3 confirmed kills, 2 probables. Well, some classic Duxford moments there. The two Merlin engine fighters going through their paces in the skies that once saw so many of both of these types in frontline operation, not least during the Battle of Britain. Spitfire 5B into land first. This aircraft very much the flagship of the Polish Heritage Flight organisation, established with the support of this aircraft's owners, the Historic Aircraft Collection. Touching down in the Spitfire is Clive Denny, and then we'll bring in the outstanding Hurricane 1 R4118 of Hurricane Heritage. Many more of both these types, of course, to be seen at Duxford's Battle of Britain Air Show, Saturday the 10th, Sunday the 11th of September, the dates for that. Some very, very exciting participation at this show. Spitfires well into double figures, 5 Hurricanes expected, a whole host of other warbirds. Some very exciting participation from the Czech Air Force with the Mi-24 and Mi-171 battlefield helicopters, and much more besides. Tickets available now on the IWM website. And bringing the Hurricane into land, the man who founded its operator Hurricane Heritage, James Brown. But now getting into the air, the great Duxford favourite, Boeing B-17G Flying Fortress, Sally B, and accompanying it, going off the grass, another Supermarine Spitfire 5. The most famous B-17 was, of course, the example named Memphis Belle, which served during wartime not far from here, with the 91st Bomb Group at Bassingbourn. It was a B-17F model. It was most famous for being the first B-17 to be officially credited with completing 25 combat sorties, a full tour for its crew, which it did between November 1942 and May 1943. In fact, its crew, headed by Captain Robert Morgan, is believed to have notched up a remarkable 29 missions. The last of Memphis Belle's 25 sorties was on the 17th of May 1943. Its escort home was being provided by RAF Spitfires, including some from number 129. Record book said, after briefing at Portreath, the squadron flew with numbers 610 and 65 squadrons as the withdrawal cover wing to about 170 fortresses attacking Lorient. One of those was Memphis Belle. The record went on to say, after patrolling over Morlaix, the wing withdrew with the bombers, one section staying behind to orbit the crew of a bomber that had bailed out about 20 miles off start point. Flight Lieutenant Watson dinghy and threw it into the sea, but it caught upon its tail unit, and it was some minutes before he could free it. That pilot was Flight Lieutenant Ewan Watson of number 129 Squadron. The Spitfire he was flying on that mission that escorted B-17 Memphis Belle on its final sortie had the serial E602. It's the very Spitfire that we see accompanying B-17 Sally B, which also has the nose art of Memphis Belle. Twice the story of B-17 Memphis Belle was immortalised on film. The first time by William Wyler's wartime documentary. The second by 1990's Memphis Belle film, in which Sally B literally played a leading role among the 6 B-17s that were assembled on British shores for the making of that production. And to this day, as a result, the aircraft carries on one side the Memphis Belle nose art, on the other that of Sally B, under which name the aircraft's been known since it started being operated on the British airshow circuit way back in 1975. In this year's Above All Others, it being the 80th anniversary of the arrival of the US 8th Air Force in East Anglia during World War II and of the first B-17 missions from this part of the world, it's worth recalling that Sally B acts as a flying memorial to the tens of thousands of Allied airmen who lost their lives in the European theatre, and in particular the bomber crews of the 8th Air Force in the B-17s and the B-24 Liberators. B-17s were built. Now only this aircraft remains in flying condition in Europe. It receives no official support. Its operation is dependent upon charitable donations and memberships of the Sally B Supporters Club. And Ellie Sallingboe, the B-17's operator, continues to work tirelessly against the odds to keep this aeroplane flying in private hands in the UK. It is a massively expensive and time-consuming business. Rolling off the grass, meanwhile, the two Curtiss fighters, the P-36C and the P-40F. Perhaps the best way to get an idea of the scale of the sacrifice that was suffered by the US Army Air Forces while operating from British soil between 1942 and 45 is to view the memorial sculpture counting the cost on the entrance walkway towards the American Air Museum, up towards the western end of the airfield. It carries silhouettes of all the American aircraft flying from the UK during wartime, that were lost on operations, and among them you will see many, many silhouettes of B-17s like this one. In for its final pass, B-17G Flying Fortress, Sally B. Dutchman Peter Kuipers flying Sally B so beautifully for us today, with Paul Schluer in the co-pilots. Now we're seeing running in from the west that Spitfire I was talking about earlier that escorted the original B-17F Memphis Belle on its final operational mission. Spitfire 5 with serial E602 from Anglia Aircraft Restorations in the original number 129 squadron markings it wore when it escorted Memphis Belle on that final sortie. The Spitfire completed in excess of 100 wartime missions during its career before being struck off charge following a taxiing incident. A very special part of the aviation heritage of this part of the world due to that connection with the US 8th Air Force. So nice to see it based here at Duxford. And that formation combination, recalling those early days of the US 8th Air Force's bomber operations from East Anglia, when the longer range P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs were not available to perform those escort duties, and so often they fell to shorter ranged RAF Spitfires. Getting airborne from the hard runway now, another unusual combination of airplanes, the Fury leading them off. And that's going to be followed by the only jet in our flying programme, the Vampire. Landing on the grass in the Anglia Aircraft Restoration's Spitfire 5, Mark Levy. We're now looking out for another outstanding pair of Second World War era fighters, again from the fighter collection. And one recalling in particular the early stages of the war in the Pacific, particularly the gleaming silver aircraft that forms part of this formation. Here they come from the motorway end, the P-36C and the P-40F. 7th of December 1941 that a young US Army Air Corps fighter pilot from the 46th Pursuit Squadron named Second Lieutenant Philip Rasmussen was awakened in his barracks at Wheeler Field, Hawaii, by the sound of aircraft overhead. It was, of course, the Japanese attack which he watched from his window. He attached a .45 caliber pistol to his pajamas and went to his aeroplane. Many aircraft on the ground at Wheeler Field had already been destroyed, but 2 P-36s and 4 P-40Cs had already launched. Rasmussen and 3 other pilots from his squadron took off in P-36As, Rasmussen's aircraft in natural metal finish like the one we've just seen, to engage Japanese D-3A Val dive bombers and their escorting A-6M-0 fighters. 2 Vals and 1 Zero were shot down by the P-36s for the loss of one of the American fighters and the near loss of Rasmussen's, which made it back to Wheeler Field despite sustaining 500 bullet holes. The glorious silver P-36C we've just seen from the fighter collection. The last example built, it came off the line in 1939, served with the US Army Air Corps, took part in the 1939 Cleveland Air Races in an experimental washable camouflage. By 1942 it had been declared obsolete and retired. And by then, the P-40 family, represented by this P-40F model, powered by the Packard-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Had continued very successfully the story of the Curtiss fighters in combat. These were never the fastest fighters of their day, nor the longest ranged, but they were very tough, very stable, and very reliable, and that made them of great use in theatres such as the Russian front and the Western Desert, where the P-40 family scored some of its greatest successes. P-40s were the type that achieved true Allied air superiority in the so-called CBI, China-Burma-India theatre. But their greatest combat exploits were surely those in the Mediterranean, North Africa and the Middle East. Where they were flown by American, British, Australian and South African pilots. 6 British and Commonwealth pilots achieved ace status flying P-40s of one type or another. But this is the aircraft type with which that lineage of Curtiss fighters really began. The P-36, the Model 75, started out as a private venture by Curtiss, became a contender in a competitive fly-off to provide the US Army Air Corps with a new monoplane fighter. A rival design, the Seversky P-35, actually was the winner of that order, but it was considerably more expensive per airframe. The Army Air Corps wanted an alternative, Curtiss had it ready, and 210 examples of the P-36 to begin with were ordered in 1937. P-36 really goes down as the first truly modern American production fighter of the mid to late 1930s. They began being delivered to pursuit groups of the US Army Air Corps in 1938, representing the by then seriously obsolete Boeing P-26. Very soon the P-36 was obsolete as far as the Americans were concerned. Curtiss had the P-40 family, like this P-40F, well under development. The P-36s found themselves relegated to training and overseas assignments, hence the P-36s being present in Hawaii when the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor came. P-36 into land first. A design that, while it may have been obsolete as far as the Americans were concerned, achieved a significant amount of export success, being flown by many overseas air arms, including perhaps most famously France's Armée de l'Air, who used the Hawk 75 very effectively during the Battle of France in 1940, in spite of coming up against far higher numbers of German fighters. The fighter collection also, as many of you will know, has a Hawk 75 in its fleet. In 2015, it was augmented by this glorious P-36C, which was flown for us today by Pete Kinsey. And how nice it was that the sun just broke through the cloud cover to give you an idea of just what a splendid sight this P-36C makes in the right light. Finished, it goes without saying, in original markings of the 27th Pursuit Squadron, US Army Air Corps, stationed at Selfridge Field, Michigan. Desert-style camouflage on the P-40F, meanwhile, that of a US Army Air Forces example flown in the Mediterranean theatre. This is the only Merlin-engined P-40 version airworthy in Europe.
Good evening, folks. If you're just joining us, you're joining us for the absolute best bit, I suspect. The light's really picking up here beautifully. You can see the P40 landing now. Thank you for tuning in. Odd voice if you've just tuned in. I'm Ian. I'm on one of the cameras. Run Planes DV. You've been hearing from Ben Donnell, who's going to continue commentating through the rest of the display, which will consist of the Vampire and Sea Fury very, very shortly. De Havilland formation of Foxmoth, Tigermoth, 2 Chipmunks, and the Spitfire 1A and Buchon, and an extra with fireworks on the wingtips to close the show. It's going to be quite a spectacle. So I'm on the lookout now for Vampire and Sea Fury. If you are enjoying the stream, do make sure to subscribe and give it a like. And do share it now, because this is going to be the best bit, I suspect. What have we got over the top? Right, okay.
As in high overhead comes a very unusual formation. Hawker Fury and De Havilland Vampire. The other propeller-driven De Havillands now going off the grass. Foxmoth, Tigermoth and 2 Chipmunks. They're going off to form up ready for their part in the programme, but now we're going to see those other 2 aeroplanes rather closer to. 2 aircraft that represent the era during which the last of the propeller-driven fighters gave way to the first of the jets, not least in the fleet air arm of the Royal Navy. Together we see the Hawker Fury ISS standing for Iraqi single seat, a land-based version of the better-known Sea Fury, in conjunction with the De Havilland Vampire FBC. It was, of course, with the fleet air arm that the Sea Fury achieved its most famous exploits during the 1950 to 53 Korean War. At the time, it had become the service's standard fighter bomber. But a few years earlier, in 1945, the Vampire had achieved a notable first in the history of British naval aviation. This was a type that had first flown in September 1943 and came into RAF service a couple of years later as a day fighter. But it was on the 3rd of December 1945 that great first for the Vampire in naval terms was notched up, when the outstanding naval test pilot, Captain Eric Winkle Brown, made the first ever aircraft carrier landing and takeoff by a jet aircraft using a Vampire Mark I. He did so aboard the carrier HMS Ocean. navalised form as the Sea Vampire, this delightful little aeroplane became the Royal Navy's first in-service jet. Another link between the two aircraft types that we saw flying together was created during 1948 when 806 Squadron of the Royal Navy sent a mixture of aircraft, 3 de Havilland Sea Hornets, a Vampire and 2 Sea Furies aboard the Canadian aircraft carrier HMCS Magnificent tour of North America. They undertook a succession of spectacular air displays across the North American continent, demonstrating the capabilities not only of their pilots, but also of what were then examples of the cutting edge of British aircraft manufacturing.
Hello folks, thanks for sticking with us during the intermission. Unplanned as ever. I say as ever, we don't do too badly on these long broadcasts. Gosh, how dark has it got now? Whoops. Yes, that's dark. Oh look, I have been tearing my hair out over connection issues. Sort myself out. Do stick with us for what's going to be the finale here. Buchon, Mark 1 Spit, and Mark Jeffries in the extra 300 with the fireworks is going to be a really excellent finale here. So do stick around. Hope you enjoyed that. You didn't miss too much. Sadly, we lost the light slightly with the Sea Fury or Fury there, which is now landing. Let's take a look. Can't see it. Can see it. Yeah, thank you for sticking around during the slight break there. Always disappointing when that happens, and it's down to me, or rather me not bringing enough people. I hereby do solemnly swear to bring 3 people next time. It's definitely a minimum. So Fury landing. Got a fire engine moving at the moment, and the Range Rover's getting out my way. Lovely. That is good news. But what a sight that was. We just caught a little bit of a really nice light, didn't we? And Ben introducing the tiger moth, or the moths and the chipmunks. Here they are. I hope you're enjoying this. It's the first visit for us to a flying evening. And honestly, some of the opportunities for light on the aeroplanes I'm really, really enjoying. Some of you will be used to me nerding out on lighting conditions and cloudscapes and things. Well, we've had all of that this evening. I hope you guys have been enjoying it at home, apart from the brief intermission. I'm sorry about that. If you have been enjoying it, we are back live with you for the rest of the day now. For the next I'll look at my watch in a moment. Let the spit go off. Yeah, so about another 20 minutes or so of flying to go. De Havilland types, Spitfire and Buchon, and as I say, Mark Jeffries in his extra 300 with the fireworks to close things out. Really worthwhile a visit this to the museum for a flying evening. I hope they retain it next year. I don't know whether they will or won't, but yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And you do have to catch the weather, but the same applies at any show, doesn't it? But to have the evening light on these beautiful aeroplanes has been a real thrill. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you do like what we're doing here today, and maybe what you've seen previously on Planes TV, do think about subscribing on YouTube. But the very best way of keeping in touch with us is signing up for the email newsletter. There's a link in the description to that. And I say that with slight trepidation because I haven't had a chance to get many of those out of the last few weeks. Managed a bit of a holiday, but hopefully you'll forgive me that. At least I'm not spamming you with offers and things, although I do have a tendency on occasion to do that. So, well, not spamming, but you know, there are the special offer which you should very, very definitely keep a lookout for. Special offers on what you say? Well, we have a subscription service at watch.planestv.com, and we're really looking forward to bringing you the September air show here at Duxford in just a week or two on that service. So you have to be a paid subscriber over on watch.planestv.com to watch that show. But yes, sign up there if you're interested in that. And I'll leave you with Ben, I think. Some of the details of these aircraft and this display. As I say, I hope you're enjoying it. Do give it a like, and feel free to moan and complain about the dropout in the connection there for a few minutes. I definitely deserve it. Yes, family-friendly channel. Forgive me that one. Nick apologise for a word you may have heard me say as I was tripping up here getting us back online. I'll be editing that one out later. Forgive me.
The subject of an extensive marketing campaign. The first Foxmoth was duly used by Arthur Hagg on loan from the factory, but in fact he discovered that loading it for yachting trips was just as tiresome as loading the car and not nearly as convenient. They were used by all sorts of operators, some unusual, others less so. The first to put the Foxmoth into use was the British Hospital's air pageant Flying Circus. Other early ones went to the likes of Iona National Airways in Ireland and Eastern Air Transport at Skegness, who showed how good the Foxmoth was for joyriding operations, and that was a niche this type would find for itself later. Then there were companies like Hillman Airways, a very important user of the Foxmoth, which bought 4 of them for use on services from Maylands Aerodrome in Romford, augmenting Edward Hillman's motor coach routes. Also, Scottish Motor Traction used Foxmoths extensively across Scotland. airplane version was offered. Fox moths could also be flown on skis, which was useful in markets like Canada. Perhaps it was on joyriding activities that the Fox moth achieved its greatest fame before and after World War II, and many people took their first flights in Fox moths, flying, for example, with Gyro Aviation off Birkdale Sands at Southport. But here is a very notable example of the tiger moth flying past us as the fox moth comes into land. This fox moth spent much of its life in New Zealand, and indeed its owner is a Kiwi, Bruce Brodie. He had it restored to airworthiness in the UK, taking to the air again in 2015, and it won the Concours d'Elegance at the 2016 Goodwood Revival in the Freddie March Spirit of Aviation contest. Now, we're more used, of course, to seeing tiger moths flying from Duxford in RAF colours, but this one represents one of a small number that were given by the British Air Ministry during wartime to the US Army Air Forces for use by fighter groups as hack and communications aeroplanes. They were kept on strength until late 1944. The scheme on this one represents an aeroplane that was operated by the 353rd Fighter Group from Gox Hill in Lincolnshire in 1943 and is named El Pistafo Jr. This after the aeroplane was subject to an extensive and very lengthy restoration, which was finished off earlier this year by Vintage Fabrics at Audley End, just down the road in Essex. Like many tiger moths built during wartime, this one came off the production line at the Morris Motors Works at Cowley in Oxford during 1944. It went on to be exported to the French Air Force. It went into civilian hands in 1951, came back to the UK around 1970, and is not believed to have flown between then and the 1st of June this year, when it took to the air again after its restoration. But now here's the first of our chipmunks continuing this de Havilland line on into the late 1940s. An aircraft designed by de Havilland Canada at Downsview, Toronto, with the aim of picking up really where the tiger moth had left off by creating a new monoplane basic trainer for the post-war market. Its first flight took place from the Downsview factory airfield on the 22nd of May 1946. Early orders were rather slow because there were still plenty of perfectly usable wartime trainers around, and many governments didn't have too much money to spend on new aeroplanes. But they soon picked up. The aircraft entered service with the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1948, with the RAF a couple of years later. The majority of chipmunks built in the UK at the de Havilland factories at Hatfield and Harden in Chester. And the silver example we saw there, one of the longest-term Duxford residents. It's owned by the Lowerth family. Peter Lowerth and his sons lavished a huge amount of tender loving care on this aircraft's restoration between 1994 and 2015, when none other than John Romain took it into the air for the first time. The red and white chipmunk that was flying there as well, in the formation at the start of that slot, a very early survivor built in 1950 at Hatfield. And that's another fairly recent, if shorter, restoration by Vintage Fabrics at Audley End from 2015 to 17. We're bringing the rest of the de Havillands into land, having first got a little Robin light aeroplane of the Anglian Flight Centres at Earl's Cone into the air on departure. We had Mark Miller from de Havilland Support Limited at the north side here at Duxford, the company that does so much to ensure the continued airworthy preservation of many historic de Havilland types, flying Bruce Brody's Foxmoth, Clive Denny next into land with the Tiger Moth, and in the two Chipmunks, Phil Hardisty and Tom Turner, who we saw earlier in two of the Yaks, of course. Phil, a commercial airline pilot, Tom, the head of airfield here at Duxford. But now for the penultimate act on the programme, we turn to the Battle of Britain, the period most indelibly associated with Duxford, and to one of the aircraft most indelibly associated with this aerodrome, having entered service here with number 19 Squadron in the summer of 1938. I'm talking, of course, about the Supermarine Spitfire, and we're going to see a number 19 Squadron veteran of the Battle of France in early 1940 in the form of N3200. That's the serial of the Spitfire 1A, owned by the Imperial War Museums, and it's about to tangle with its old enemy, the Messerschmitt Bf 109. Played by the Spanish-built Rolls-Royce Merlin-engined Hispano Buchon. And here's the Buchon in first from the left. final warbird display of the evening comes to a close, though we do have, as I've mentioned, a really spectacular closing act to bring the flying to a conclusion this evening. Into land first, the enemy, the Hispano Buchon from Anglia Aircraft Restorations. That aeroplane flown by Steve Jones. And then, as the light fades still further, we await the arrival of IWM's very own Spitfire 1A. An aircraft that will, of course, be taking a starring role in a some very unusual formations to be planned. IWM.org.uk is where you can go to book tickets. It's also where you can go to sign up for a rather different event the following Sunday from that. Sunday the 18th of September is the date for the Duxford Dash. An event for the athletes amongst you, or indeed the fun runners, your chance to see this airfield from a wholly different perspective by running around it. Details, once again, all to be found on the museum website. Such an evocative sight, a Spitfire silhouetted against the Duxford skyscape. As the last embers of sunlight burn out, in comes the Mark 1A, one of the three such examples of that mark we have based at IWM Duxford, all of which will be airborne as part of our September Battle of Britain Air Show. At the controls of N3200, the IWM example, Chief Pilot of the Aircraft Restoration Company, John Gowdy. But now, lining up on the runway is our final item of this Duxford Flying Evening for 2022, and we're going to bring things to a close with one of this new brand of airshow act that sprung up in the last few years, dedicated to performing twilight pyrotechnic displays. But it's a very familiar name. It's Mark Jeffries, multiple times British aerobatic champion at different levels. Here he is flying his extra EA330SC unlimited aerobatic aircraft. Out there, adjacent to the runway, is a team of pyrotechnicians who are going to provide us, accompanied by Mark, with the smoke trailing extra, with the most dramatic of conclusions to today's show. This quite superb 330 horsepower development of the family of unlimited aerobatic aeroplanes conceived by the German Walter Extra is, in many ways, the ultimate development of that line. You can see that for the purposes of this sort of twilight display, Mark's also fitted the aircraft with some very powerful LED lighting, as well as the very bright strobe lights, wingtips, and he's making full use of the dotty smoke system, the on-off smoke system, which is not being turned on and off by Mark in the cockpit. It is all controlled by Wi-Fi on board the aircraft. The aeroplane appearing in the colours of the Global Stars aerobatic team, which Mark also leads. And there go the wingtip mounted fireworks and pyrotechnics. It really does add a whole new dimension to air display flying. pyros on the ground for some reason. Meanwhile, Mark bringing the extra round a few more times. Hopefully we should be ready on the next run, I gather. And alas, it doesn't appear as though for whatever reason that is going to prove possible, so sorry about that. Obviously some technical snag there, but with that we bring to a close the flying programme at the 2022 Duxford Flying Evening. Thank you very much indeed to everyone who has participated in today's display, whether flying in it, organising it, controlling it, looking after the aircraft on the ground. Many volunteers, of course, involved in that, giving up their time. So thank you to all of them, and thank you above all to all of you. We couldn't have done it without you. It's been great to see so many of you here for the second of what we hope will be a long-running series of these flying evenings. It really does bring something different to Duxford, and we're most grateful for your support. Don't forget those future events coming up here, beginning on Saturday 10th, Sunday 11th of September, with the Duxford Battle of Britain Air Show. The biggest warbird spectacular you will see on these shores this year. And of course the site here remains open for a good while yet for you to go around, maybe take some interesting night photographs of some of the museum hangars and the like, which remain open. It really has been another very memorable occasion. So once again, my thanks to you all. Have a safe journey home. Enjoy the rest of this long weekend. And from me, Ben Dunnell, goodbye.
I think Ben's done my job for me there. Thank you all for tuning in. And I'm using my phone as a little light here. Oh, thank you, Adam. Yes, he's going to light me up beautifully. Can you see me? It's very dark, very strange to be filming in these conditions, reminiscent of some of those Eastbourne shows we've done in the past, and Bournemouth and the likes, where you do get a good few display teams in the dark. And it's reminded me just how poor our JVCs are in the dark. Poor Adam was shooting the wide angle gain, full gain in there, and I could see on my monitor some dead pixels on the sensor and all sorts. The poor old JVCs, which are 10 years old. I'm using the new camera. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed it. Do give the video a like and share it to anyone you think might enjoy it. You didn't miss too much in our little drop out there during the Vampire Fury. The light we lost the light a little bit. But yeah, sorry about that little snag again. If you really enjoyed it and you'd like to support Planes TV and what we do, you can become a channel member here on YouTube. Very best way, though, is signing up on the On Demand service, and if you do that now, you'll have access to the September air show. So if you can't make it, come and see double figures numbers of Spitfires, lots of Hurricanes. I'm trying to think what else. The guys Blenheim with the... and Czech helicopters as well. The Czech Air Force, Czech airmen, shall we say, here at Duxford for the first time since the Second World War. So that's quite a thing. And the last ever airshow, last ever UK airshow appearance, probably airshow appearance of a Czech hind, really. NATO days, which we will be covering also, will be the last. Really, I didn't realise they were retiring them. Oh, well, that's quite sad then. But yeah, make the most of it. Come here to Duxford, watch the hind display with the hip, and all those Spitfires and Hurricanes. Failing that, you can sign up to the on-demand service. I'm watching myself on YouTube there. I can barely see myself, so hopefully this voice from the dark is making some sense. Yeah, give the video a like. Thanks for tuning in again. Apologies about all the earlier hiccup and the loose goose hiccup while the mic was open as well, if anyone caught that. Ryan saying thank you. Where off tomorrow, mate? Car spotter? Beach, probably. Thanks for streaming for us, says Hawker Hind. Lovely username. You're very welcome, and thanks for tuning in, and thanks for joining the chat. It is so nice to see people sharing an event in that way. Looking forward to even more on my visit to Duxford on the 16th of September, says Russ B. Thank you, and thank you, Chris, as ever, for keeping an eye on the chat. Not too much trouble, I hope. And look at that. Bless him. Gareth Ross doing my job for me with a rundown of the events that we'll be covering in the coming weeks. Not very many weeks either. We've got the Jersey Air display. Hey, I'm just going to read this off. Jersey Air display on the 8th of September. 10th, 11th is that Duxford September show on our on-demand service. And then we'll be producing a English language live broadcast. Pleased to say Ben will be joining us over in the Czech Republic to give an English language live broadcast to what is a fantastic NATO event there, and a especially good event, if we can look at it in that way. Very good cooperation from very many NATO air arms, and so lots of excellent flying, lots of really interesting static aircraft there. And yeah, let me get the date again from Gareth Ross's post. So NATO days will be the 17th, 18th of September. So join us then. And then we'll be bringing our season to a close probably. We may do the odd other thing, you never know. The Flying Day here in October. Are they public with the things that are going on? No. And Adam shakes his head. That's going to be a good one. I think I've put my foot in it and mentioned that on previous ones. Maybe I haven't. I'll keep quiet for the time being. Right, I'm going to sign off because it is 8:30 and I'm going to drive to Devon this evening, having driven up this morning. And Leo Dehan, thank you, saying, come on guys, we can do more likes. How many likes have we got? We got 500 likes. We just ticked over 500 likes. Thank you, everybody. That's really, I very rarely bother to press the like button on YouTube. So thank you, 500 of you who've done that. Hey, it's 12:30 p.m. Why dark? Dennis, that means you're probably in America. Well, I'm not. I'm in the UK. This is Cambridgeshire, Duxford, Cambridgeshire, UK, and it is very dark. You can't see me. That light is doing virtually nothing. Anyway, you don't want to see me. You want to see aeroplanes. We missed the ME-163. No, that would have been something in the dark. Yes, sadly not something we... it's probably a good thing, for judging by the safety record of that those early rockets. Be safe, everyone, says Lloydies. Thanks for a great event, says Gareth. It was a great event, wasn't it? Well done, Ducks, for putting on another fantastic flying evening. I've really enjoyed our first visit here. And Dennis says bring out the night fighters. Well, we could do, couldn't we? They're all right there. They've got the radar to help them. We would be filming a black sky and not giving you very much of interest. And see you next. Let's cut those mics. And see you next live. Also, it's gone dark quite quick. Is that airshow finished now, Callan? Yes, it is. It's all done. Much darker there than it is in Manchester. Well, it's video, isn't it? I'm not kitted out with lights to record myself in the darkness. So probably with that note, I probably should say goodbye. So thank you again for tuning in. Thanks for sticking with us when we dropped out. And if you'd like to keep in touch with what we get up to, email newsletters the very best way. I do those weekly normally. Just had a few quiet weeks. Generally out on a Friday to let you know what we're up to over the weekend. Of course, you can follow us on social media. Subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. If you really like what we're doing, become a channel member as Leo Dahan. Help me with this pronunciation, Adam. We can do a better job of that for our new channel member, our supporter. Leo Dahan? Leo, maybe? I'd be interested to know. Lou Dahan? Thank you for joining as a channel member. If you'd like to do the same, there's a button somewhere on the page you can press, and that helps us with the little monthly amount to encourage me to do more of these free-to-view streams. If you really like what we do, there are the pay-to-view, or rather the subscription service, which gives you access to those paid streams we do, including the Duxford September show coming up. And if you subscribe, you'll get access to that, and also all of the React show and the Duxford June show that we've recorded, and the back catalogue of 30 years of airshow broadcasts and video programmes. Right, enough of that, I think. Hope you've enjoyed this one. I can see lots of likes, so I think a few people have. Thanks for those who've joined as channel members and left those super chats. Right, play some music in, go home, eat some McDonald's, and otherwise enjoy ourselves. Right, wish me luck. 4.5 hours home. Toodaloo. Bye-bye. Thank you.